Most people spend their lives thinking in paychecks. They measure their worth by hours worked. They measure their safety by the next deposit. And they measure their future by what is left after the bills are paid. The investor thinks differently. The investor does not wake up asking, "How much did I earn?" The investor wakes up asking, "What do I own?" Because ownership changes the entire equation of life. A paycheck rewards effort once. Ownership rewards effort repeatedly. A paycheck stops when you stop. Ownership keeps working when you sleep. One builds income, the other builds identity. And the moment a person shifts from thinking like a worker to thinking like an investor, their relationship with money, time, and opportunity is permanently altered. Most people are trained to chase income. Very few are trained to build assets, and that is not an accident. Income feels safe because it is familiar. Ownership feels uncertain because it requires patience, learning, risk, and self-trust. But the uncomfortable truth is this: security does not come from income alone. It comes from control, and control is created through ownership. The investor does not worship the paycheck. The investor respects it, but does not trust it with the future. Income is a tool, not a destination. It is the seed, not the harvest. The spender uses income to consume. The worker uses income to survive. The investor uses income to acquire things that produce more income. This is where most lives quietly separate. The same dollar that one person spends on convenience, another person uses to buy leverage. The same dollar that one person trades for comfort, another person trades for control. And over time, those tiny choices compound into radically different lives. The spender thinks in pleasure. The investor thinks in position. The spender asks, "What can this buy me today?" The investor asks, "What can this build for me tomorrow?" The spender feels rich temporarily. The investor becomes wealthy eventually. One chases feeling, the other builds freedom. Time exposes the difference. The spender feels ahead in the beginning. The investor appears behind. The spender lives loud early. The investor lives quiet early. But eventually the curve bends, and when it does, the spender wonders why effort now feels heavier. And the investor wonders why leverage now feels lighter. Workers sell hours. Investors buy results. Workers trade time for money. Investors trade money for time. And time is the only resource that does not renew itself. You can lose money and recover it. You can lose confidence and rebuild it. You can lose opportunity and create another. But time never asks for permission when it leaves. The investor understands this. That is why they stop trading their entire life for wages as soon as they are able. Not because work is bad, but because work alone is limited. There are only so many hours in a day. There are no limits on leverage. A worker's income is capped by personal energy. An investor's income is expanded by systems, ownership, and scale. One grows by more effort, the other grows by better structure, and no matter how gifted, disciplined, or driven a worker is, the clock always wins eventually. The investor escapes the tyranny of the clock by converting effort into equity, by converting labor into leverage, by converting discipline into distribution. That is the great shift. That is the line between survival and strategy. Every dollar you touch becomes either a servant or a master. It either goes to work for you, or you go back to work for it. The investor never forgets this. That is why spending is intentional. That is why impulse is dangerous. That is why debt without return is a trap. Spending is not the enemy. Uncontrolled spending is. Because uncontrolled spending does not just steal money, it steals future options. It steals flexibility. It steals peace. It steals power. Every unnecessary expense delays ownership. Every impulse purchase postpones leverage. The investor does not kill comfort. The investor delays it. Because delayed comfort builds permanent comfort, immediate comfort builds permanent pressure, and pressure eventually turns into panic. The spender feels rich when the account is full. The investor feels rich when the income no longer depends on their presence. One celebrates deposits, the other celebrates independence. Investors think in decades, not weekends. They think in alignment, not appetite. They understand that wealth is not built from luck. It is built from repeated decisions that look boring in the moment and brilliant in hindsight. The worker waits for raises, the investor creates engines, the worker waits for opportunity, the investor designs opportunity. The worker hopes to retire someday, the investor plans to replace income streams intentionally. This is not about intelligence. It is about orientation. It is not about being born with advantage. It is about where your mind points when money enters your hands. Do you point it toward consumption or toward construction? Wealth is not created by what you earn alone. It is created by what you keep, what you deploy, and what you allow to multiply. Many people earn well their entire lives and die owned by the lifestyle they built. Not because the income was small, but because the thinking never shifted. The investor also understands that money is not the goal. Control is, freedom is, leverage is, choice is. Wealth is simply the scorecard that reflects how well those were built. And this is the moment where the question becomes personal, not emotional, not dramatic, just honest. When money enters your hands, do you treat it like a reward or like a soldier? Do you send it on a mission, or do you sacrifice it to impulse? Because every financial future is being drafted one decision at a time, quietly, daily, without applause. Without announcements, without forgiveness for poor habits, you do not rise to wealth by one big win. You rise by one perspective shift that changes thousands of small choices. You do not escape working forever by hating work. You escape by outgrowing dependency on it, and that growth begins the moment you stop asking, "How much do I make?" and start asking, "What am I building?" The worker builds a week. The spender builds a moment. The investor builds a machine, and the machine eventually buys back the one thing no job ever returns: your time. Spenders do not wake up intending to sabotage their future. They wake up intending to feel good today. And that is how tomorrow gets quietly traded away. The spender's problem is not desire, it is direction. Desire without discipline always points toward what is easy now, not what is valuable later. And when comfort becomes the priority, the future becomes the price. Every impulse purchase is a small agreement with short-term thinking. It feels harmless in the moment. It even feels deserved. But the future never forgets those agreements. It collects on them slowly, silently, and relentlessly. Money that could have become freedom becomes furniture. Money that could have become options becomes outfits. Money that could have become leverage becomes leftovers. Spenders don't run out of money because they earn too little. They run out because every dollar already has an emotional assignment. It must soothe stress. It must reward effort. It must cancel discomfort. And when money becomes emotional medicine instead of a strategic tool, it will always be consumed instead of constructed. The spender lives in a permanent present, not by joy but by habit. Tomorrow is assumed, next month is ignored, next decade is invisible. The spender does not intentionally reject the future. They simply postpone thinking about it so often that eventually there is very little left to work with. Every lifestyle becomes a cost. Every upgrade becomes a weight. Every convenience becomes a commitment. And one day, the spender wakes up realizing that their income does not belong to them. It belongs to the life they built without thinking past the next feeling. Spending itself is not the villain. Thoughtless spending is. There is nothing wrong with enjoyment. There is something fatal about entitlement without restraint. When pleasure becomes mandatory and discipline becomes optional, the math of life always turns against you. The spender asks, "Can I afford the payment?" The investor asks, "What does this delay?" The spender thinks in monthly comfort. The investor thinks in lifetime capacity. One measures affordability by today's income. The other measures it by tomorrow's opportunity cost. An opportunity cost is invisible to the emotional mind. You do not feel the business that never started. You do not hear the silence of the asset that was never bought. You do not grieve the income stream that never existed. You only feel the addiction of familiarity tightening quietly around your schedule. Spenders also confuse motion with progress. Buying feels like action, spending feels like control, consuming feels like movement, but motion is not growth. Consumption is not construction. Activity is not achievement. You can be busy buying your own limitations every week. The spender's calendar fills with payments. The investor's calendar fills with projects. The spender's future is budgeted by debt. The investor's future is expanded by equity. One becomes owned by comfort. The other becomes supported by structure. Spenders also inherit beliefs that sound harmless but shape entire destinies. You only live once. You deserve this. Money is meant to be spent. Those statements feel liberating on the surface. But repeated daily, they build a prison with luxury furniture and invisible bars. You only live once is not a reason to waste tomorrow. It is a reason to protect it. You deserve comfort, yes, but you also deserve independence, and independence is purchased with discipline long before it is delivered with pleasure. The spender celebrates the weekend, the investor builds the week, the spender escapes the job, the investor replaces the job. The spender chases relief, the investor designs release. Most people believe they will start thinking like investors once they have more money. In truth, they only get more money after they start thinking like investors. Thinking always comes before position. Mindset always precedes outcome. A spender with more income simply becomes a spender with bigger bills. A spender with a raise simply buys more chains for the same freedom. The lifestyle grows faster than the leverage because the thinking never changed. The investor understands that wealth is not built by excess income alone. It is built by excess discipline. It is not about what remains after expenses. It is about what is intentionally removed from impulse. Spenders also learn to justify everything. The mind becomes a courtroom where the emotion is the defendant and logic is forced to serve as the lawyer. And a clever mind can justify almost any expense, but justification does not change consequences. It only delays awareness. The spender does not feel broke when they spend. They feel broke when the bill arrives later. The pleasure is always upfront. The payment is always postponed. And postponed costs are far more dangerous than immediate ones because they feel unreal until they arrive fully formed. Spending on credit is especially seductive because it lets you pretend today is richer than it really is. But borrowed pleasure always charges interest and stress. Debt does not just cost money, it costs options. It costs sleep, it costs mobility, it costs pride, it costs choices. The investor does not fear spending. They fear abandonment of purpose. They know that every dollar must align with direction, or it will eventually work against them. Money that is not directed will dominate, and this is where identity begins to shift, when a person stops asking, "What do I want right now?" and starts asking, "What do I want to become?" The spender begins to dissolve, because the spender only survives in the absence of purpose. Spending without vision is like throwing bricks into a pile and calling it a building. Vision gives structure. Vision tells the dollar where to go and what to become. The spender chases feeling rich. The investor builds being rich. One seeks sensation. The other seeks insulation. And here is the truth that changes everything. Most people are not poor because they lack opportunity. They are poor because they leak opportunity in small daily amounts they never track. Wealth does not disappear in one dramatic collapse. It leaks away subtly through habits that feel harmless. The spender does not wake up one day ruined. They wake up one day tired of running in place. And only then do they realize how long they have been standing still. But the moment awareness arrives, the cycle can break. The moment spending stops being emotional and starts being intentional, the future stops bleeding quietly. The moment pleasure stops being automatic and starts being earned, the trajectory bends. You do not have to hate enjoyment to escape the spender's trap. You only have to put enjoyment in its proper place, after construction, after alignment, after discipline has purchased the option. The spender lives for today and hopes tomorrow will forgive them. The investor sacrifices today so tomorrow can serve them. And every financial identity is revealed not in crisis, but in comfort. When money is easy, thinking is exposed. When income rises, character is tested. You will either teach your money to obey your future, or your future will be forced to obey your money. Most people spend their entire lives selling the only thing they truly own, their time. They wake up each morning, trade hours for money, and return home too tired to build anything that belongs to them. The worker mindset is built on a simple, silent assumption: as long as I work hard, I will be secure. But hard work alone has never guaranteed security. If it did, the hardest workers in the world would be the wealthiest. The truth is, security is not earned by effort alone. It is earned by building something that continues paying even when you stop. The worker thinks in hours. The investor thinks in systems. The worker earns by showing up. The investor earns by building structures that show up for them. One lives by activity, the other lives by architecture, and architecture always outlives activity. There is nothing wrong with working. Work builds discipline, work builds character, work builds humility, but work alone cannot build freedom. Because no matter how much you love what you do, there are only 24 hours in a day. At some point, the body gets tired, the energy declines, and the clock becomes the one opponent you cannot defeat. The worker sells slices of their life for a wage. The investor buys chunks of their future by converting money into machines that work without exhaustion. This is the mindset shift that changes everything. How can I make my money work harder than I do? Workers often believe that their income is limited by talent or opportunity. But the truth is simpler. Their income is limited by the hours their body can provide. The investor does not escape work by avoiding it. They escape by multiplying the effect of their work. They build mechanisms, assets, skills, leverage, equity that continue producing long after the initial effort has been invested. A worker must keep climbing to rise. An investor builds an elevator. A worker must keep pushing to advance. An investor builds momentum that eventually pulls them forward. This is why two people can work the same amount of hours, put in the same intensity, and yet end their lives with entirely different results. One traded time, the other built time. When a worker stops working, the income stops. When an investor stops working, the income continues. It may even grow, and that single difference, whether money dies when effort dies, determines the trajectory of an entire life. Workers sell the present, investors build the future, workers depend on the next paycheck, investors depend on the next return. Workers fear losing their job, investors fear losing their discipline, and that difference is everything. The worker mindset is reinforced by society. From childhood, people are taught to get a job and not to build a system. They are taught to rely on employers, not on ownership. They are taught to wait for raises, not to create revenue. They are taught to climb ladders, not to build them. Climbing a ladder is honorable, but building a ladder is transformational. The worker's world is linear. More hours, more money. Fewer hours, less money. The investor's world is exponential. More leverage, more return. More ownership, more income. More structure, more freedom. The worker increases income by increasing output. The investor increases income by increasing ownership. Ownership is the great multiplier. It is the difference between maintenance and growth, between surviving and scaling, between living for the next payment and living for the next level. Workers often say, "I don't have time to build something on the side." But that is precisely the trap. If you never build something on the side, you will always work on someone else's inside. If you never create a parallel track, you will live your entire life on a single track, one breakdown away from collapse. Freedom is not created when you quit your job. Freedom is created when you no longer depend solely on it. An investor uses a job as a tool, not as an identity. They use employment to fund investment, not to define existence. And eventually, the investments become strong enough to replace reliance on the job altogether. Workers often think investors are lucky. But luck is simply the moment preparation meets opportunity. Investors prepare, workers wait, investors learn. Workers repeat, investors sacrifice early. Workers escape early. Investors plant seeds. Workers hope for shade. And the greatest tragedy is that many workers never realize how close they are to a different life. A few years of discipline, a few smart decisions, a few assets built slowly, quietly, consistently, and everything changes. Time is the most valuable asset you will ever possess, but time becomes powerful only when it is multiplied. A worker spends time, an investor deploys it. A worker loses time with each passing day. An investor gains time with each passing year, because the systems they built begin returning value without requiring additional hours. When your money works, you don't have to. When your assets grow, you don't have to grow tired. When your systems produce, you don't have to produce endlessly. This is not about laziness, it is about leverage. It is about understanding that a life built only on effort will always end in exhaustion. The investor builds a life where effort becomes optional, not because they refuse to work, but because they refuse to rely on work forever. And here is the shift that transforms everything. My time is too valuable to be spent endlessly. My time must be used to build what outlives me. Your future will be determined by one decision. Will you spend your life working for money, or will you spend a season learning how to make money work for you? Because the worker sells hours, the investor creates a life. Every dollar that comes into your life arrives with a silent question attached to it. Will you send it to work for you, or will you go back to work for it? Most people never hear this question. They only hear the sound of desire calling their name. And because of that, their money becomes a trap instead of a tool. Money itself is neutral. It has no character. It only amplifies the character of the one who holds it. In the hands of the undisciplined, money disappears. In the hands of the intentional, money multiplies. The difference is never the amount. It is always the direction. A tool is something that expands your power. A trap is something that limits it. And every financial decision you make pushes you toward one or the other. There is no middle ground. Either your money is building your future, or it is quietly shrinking it. Most people use money to escape discomfort. They buy relief. They buy convenience. They buy distraction. They buy approval. And in doing so, they turn money into emotional medicine. But medicine taken daily without a prescription eventually becomes poison. When money becomes your emotional regulator, it will always be consumed instead of commanded. The investor treats money like an employee. It is assigned a job, it is expected to perform, it is evaluated on results. The spender treats money like a guest. It is entertained, indulged, and exhausted. The worker treats money like a lifeline. It is feared, protected, and depended on. But the investor treats money like a soldier. It is disciplined, it is deployed, and it is returned stronger or not sent again. A dollar used as a tool is sent to acquire skills, assets, leverage, education, ownership, systems, and opportunity. A dollar used as a trap is sent to acquire status, comfort, impulse, validation, and temporary feeling. One multiplies power, the other multiplies pressure. Many people believe traps feel dangerous. In financial life, traps feel comfortable. They feel familiar, they feel deserved, they feel harmless. A trap rarely looks like a crisis at first. It looks like a reward, it looks like relief, it looks like just this once, and then slowly, quietly, it becomes a pattern. And patterns become prisons. Debt without return is one of the most dangerous traps of all, not because it requires repayment, but because it requires obedience. You begin to structure your life around payments instead of purpose. You say no to opportunity because you must say yes to obligation. Your future becomes scheduled by yesterday's impulses. The tool builder asks, will this purchase pay me back? The trap builder asks, will this make me feel better? And those two questions never lead to the same destination. Tools create time. Traps consume it. Tools create options. Traps remove them. Tools expand your choices. Traps narrow them. And one day, without realizing when it happened, you wake up inside a life where everything is scheduled and nothing is chosen. Every trap is built from justification. I work hard. I deserve this. Life is short. I'll make more later. All of these may be true, but truth without direction still destroys futures. What you deserve is not just comfort. You deserve leverage. You deserve power. You deserve independence, and independence is never produced by indulgence. The investor delays pleasure not because they hate pleasure, but because they understand timing. Pleasure before progress weakens the will. Pleasure after progress strengthens it. One erodes discipline. The other reinforces it. A tool dollar does not always feel exciting. Often it feels boring. Education is not glamorous. Ownership is not flashy. Compounding is not thrilling. Waiting is not celebrated. But boredom is temporary and power is permanent. The investor chooses a few years of quiet buildup over a lifetime of loud survival. Most people do not lose their future in one dramatic financial mistake. They lose it in small daily leaks. Subscription here, upgrade there, impulse now, convenience later. And each one feels insignificant, but compounding does not discriminate. It will compound wealth or it will compound weakness. It simply multiplies what you feed it. The trap is not the purchase, the trap is the pattern. A single indulgence does not ruin a life. A default mindset does. When spending becomes automatic and investing becomes optional, the future is quietly sold without negotiation. The investor trains the reflex to ask, what does this create? Not just, what does this cost? Cost is measured in dollars. Creation is measured in identity, leverage, and time. The most expensive things in life are not what you buy. They are what you fail to build. A tool dollar builds confidence because it produces evidence of progress. A trap dollar builds guilt because it produces reminders of delay. Confidence multiplies discipline. Guilt multiplies avoidance, and avoidance is a silent partner of failure. Money used as a trap also distorts identity. You begin to think you are what you wear, what you drive, where you go. The investor knows identity is built by what you own, what you control, and what you command, not by what you display. Status fades, leverage endures. The greatest lie traps tell is this: you'll have discipline later. Later is not a location. It is a story people tell themselves to avoid present responsibility. Discipline is not found in the future. It is practiced in the now, or it never arrives. The investor does not wait for perfect conditions to treat money like a tool. They start with little, they practice with little, they prove with little, and little by little, they become the kind of person who can be trusted with much. The spender waits for more money to change behavior. The investor changes behavior to earn more money. And the real transformation happens when you stop asking how much a dollar buys and start asking how much power it builds. A tool will not flatter you. It will not impress others. It will not give instant applause, but it will quietly increase your position. A trap will entertain you loudly while it steals your quiet future. Money that is not directed will dominate. Money that is not trained will betray. Money that is not assigned will escape. And this is the moment where everything shifts. The day a person finally understands, my future is not decided by what I earn, but by what I command. The trap loses power. Because the trap only works on the unconscious, awareness breaks it. From that day forward, every dollar becomes a test of leadership. Will you lead it toward your future, or will it lead you back into your habits? Because in the end, money never decides who you become. You decide what money becomes, a tool or a trap. Wealth is not a moment. It is a behavior repeated long enough that the results can no longer be ignored. Most people think wealth arrives through luck, timing, or one big breakthrough. In reality, wealth arrives through thousands of small decisions made consistently in the same direction. It is not created in excitement, it is created in alignment. A single good decision can change a day. Repeated good decisions can change a destiny. This is where most people fail, not in intelligence, not in opportunity, not in talent, but in consistency. They make one disciplined choice and expect a lifetime of reward. Wealth does not respond to single efforts. It responds to patterns. Every day, you are voting for the life you will live later. Every dollar spent, every hour invested, every habit repeated is a silent vote being cast. You do not become wealthy by declaring it. You become wealthy by behaving in ways that make poverty impossible. An impossibility is created through repetition, not intention. Most people are motivated in bursts. They feel inspired at the beginning of the year, at the beginning of the month, at the beginning of a problem. But when the emotion fades, so does the action. The investor understands that emotion is unreliable. Discipline is dependable, and wealth only answers to what is dependable. You never accidentally build wealth. You may accidentally earn money. You may stumble into opportunity, but you only build wealth on purpose. It requires the same decision again and again, to delay, to deploy, to discipline, to direct, and every time that decision is repeated, it gets easier. Not because life gets easier, but because identity gets stronger. At first, discipline feels heavy. It feels restricting. It feels lonely. It feels like you are walking against the current while everyone else floats comfortably downstream. But what most people don't see is that downstream is always toward congestion and chaos. Upstream is quiet for a reason. Only the committed travel there. Wealth is built in environments where boredom is permitted and consistency is honored. It is not built in chaos. It is not built in urgency. It is built in routines that look unimpressive from the outside, but compound relentlessly on the inside. The poor decision shouts. The wealthy decision whispers. The poor decision demands attention. The wealthy decision demands patience. One makes noise, the other makes momentum. Most people fail because they cannot tolerate slow progress. They want fast improvement with slow effort. They want dramatic results from minor discipline, but life does not work on wishful equations. It works on earned equations. Input multiplied by time equals outcome. If you eat poorly today, you will not feel the full consequence tomorrow. If you save consistently today, you will not feel the full reward tomorrow. Both consequences are delayed. And because they are delayed, most people ignore them, but delay does not cancel impact. It only hides it until it becomes undeniable. The wealthy understand this delay. They trust unseen growth. They trust invisible progress. They trust the future while they are still standing in sacrifice. They do not quit just because results are quiet. They continue because alignment is loud inside them. Many people quit not because they are wrong, but because they are early. They break discipline at the exact moment when compounding is about to become visible. They abandon structure at the very stage when identity is about to lock in. And once they quit, they tell themselves it didn't work, when in truth, they simply didn't stay long enough for it to show. Wealth is not built by intensity alone. It is built by duration. Anyone can be disciplined for a week. Very few stay aligned for a decade. But decades are exactly what wealth responds to. People want to compress the timeline without compressing the effort. Life never agrees to that negotiation. You do not rise to wealth by wanting it badly. You rise by becoming the kind of person who behaves correctly even when no reward appears immediately. That is the price of compounding. You pay up front and get paid later. Most people want to get paid first and behave later, and they stay exactly where they are. The investor does not ask, "How do I get rich fast?" The investor asks, "How do I become correct permanently?" Because fast wealth disappears as quickly as it arrives when the identity is not strong enough to hold it. Permanent wealth is held by permanent habits. Wealth is delayed proof of character. It arrives long after the discipline that created it. By the time most people notice success, the difficult part is already over. They see the harvest, but never saw the lonely planting seasons. Discipline at the beginning feels unfair. Discipline in the middle feels pointless. Discipline at the end feels powerful. But many people quit at the first two stages and never experience the third. The wealthy are not always smarter. They are more consistent. They are not always more gifted. They are more committed. They are not always more informed. They are more aligned. They stay long enough in the right direction for time to become an ally instead of an enemy. And one of the greatest deceptions in life is believing that one day you will suddenly become disciplined without having practiced discipline daily. Identity is not switched on. It is trained in repetition. You do not wake up wealthy in character. You grow wealthy in character one decision at a time. The spender collapses into desire. The worker collapses into routine. The investor stands in decision. Decision is the highest form of discipline. It is the moment you choose your future over your feeling. And that moment does not arrive once. It arrives every day. Wealth is not created when you feel like doing the right thing. It is created when you do the right thing despite how you feel. And the most uncomfortable truth of all is this: no one is stopping most people from becoming wealthy. They are being stopped by their own daily agreements with convenience, distraction, impatience, and comfort. Wealth does not require perfection. It requires direction that is not abandoned. It requires momentum that is not sabotaged. It requires repetition that is not replaced by emotion. One good month means nothing without the second. One disciplined year means little without the next 9. One correct choice means nothing without another after it. Wealth is not dramatic. It is deliberate. And one day, after years of quiet alignment, one of two things happens. Either your habits begin to serve you or your excuses finally stop working. The wealthy arrive at freedom not by luck and not by accident, but by decision made so often it became identity. And identity, once formed, no longer negotiates with comfort, it commands the future